everybody, and welcome to Learning at Home with Mrs. V. All right, so this week we're going to be focusing on ratios. What's a ratio? A ratio is a comparison of two amounts or quantities. All right, so two amounts. When we're comparing two things, then we can use a ratio. So, how do we write a ratio? Well, ratios can be written with a colon. So this would be read 2 to 3. It can be written as a fraction, 2 to 3. It can be written out with the word 2 to 3, or 2 for every 3. So if I would go back through and look at this, if I were comparing animals at the dog shelter, or at the shelter, I always call it a dog shelter. Animals at a shelter. So if I say for every two cats to 3 dogs, 2 cats to 3 dogs, 2 cats to 3 dogs, or 2 cats for every 3 dogs. All right, so that's how we would read those. Okay, so now that we know how we can write ratios, we know what ratios are. Now I'm going to show you something a little different. How do we actually break down ratios? Well, ratios can be part to part. So you'll notice up here, all of these are part to part. And what I mean by that is I have 2 cats to 3 dogs. Now, if I wanted to compare part to whole with my information that I used up here, it would be 2 cats for every, so it would be 2 cats for every 5 animals, okay? Because that would be the whole, all right? So over here, it would be 5 to 2 because we've got the whole compared to the part. All right, so now that we've got this information kind of down, let's go ahead and let's do some examples. So I went ahead and I took a look at the Browns football standings, and I've written a statement here, and I'm going to use this statement in order to write some comparisons or ratios. All right, the Browns have won 11 games and lost 5 games. So if I want to write part to part, I'm going to compare their wins to their losses. If I want to know, if I said compare, or if I said show the Browns wins to losses, I would be writing 11 to 5. Now if I want to show their wins to the number of games, that would be the whole. So that would be 11 to 16. So it doesn't say how many games they played, but I can figure that from adding the wins to the losses. All right, so again, whole to part. So whole would be the number of games that they played. Again, we're focusing on the wins to the wins. So that would be 16 to 11. So we've got part to part, wins to losses, part to whole, wins to the number of games, whole to part, number of games to wins. So it depends on what they're asking, what the question is asking, whether you're going to have a part to part answer, a part to whole, or a whole to part. So if the question is, what is the number of games compared to the number of losses? So for every how many games they had how many losses, then you would be doing the whole to part because you're telling the whole amount first, okay? So you just have to look and see what they're asking. So the information that they ask for first is the number that's going to go first in your ratio. What they're asking for second will obviously go second in the ratio. So far I've shown you how to write this with a colon. And remember when I came to the colon, I said 2, all right? 11 to 5. Okay, so let's take a look at another piece of information. So this piece of information, today we will have 9 hours of daylight, okay? So if I want to compare part to part, so if I say I want to know the number of hours of daylight to the number of hours of non-daylight. So I would be putting 9 first, 9, And notice I'm showing it a different way. I'm showing the fraction way to write a ratio. So 9 hours of daylight to 15 hours of non-daylight. So where did I get the 15? Well, I know that there are 24 hours in a day, and I know that 9 plus 15 gives me 24. So that's where I got the 15. Okay, so 9 to 15. All right, so over here, if I want to do part to whole, I want to know the number of hours of daylight to the number of hours in the day. So I'm going to be writing this fraction 9 to 24. Now, last one, whole to part. So whole would be the number of hours in the day, part would be the number of hours of daylight. So it would be written 24 to 9. Okay, so that's the way that it would be written if it was written in fraction form. So far we've got the colon and the fraction form. So the last way to write it would be to write it just with 2. All right, so if I've got 10 girls and 14 boys in a class, and I want to compare the girls to the boys. Notice I said girls first, so the girls are going to go first in my comparison. All right, so it's going to be 10 to 14. Okay, 10 to 14, number of girls to the number of boys. So that would be part to part, part to whole. Well, when I add this up, I can tell that the whole class, there are 24 students. So if I'm going to do girls to the whole class, I do 10 to 24. If I want to do whole to part, I have to do the whole class first. So the whole class would be 24, 2, and then the part would be the number of girls, would be 10. Now, if I went back through, I could go back through, and if I wanted to focus on the boys, how would that change things? So how it would change things here, I would have to reverse everything. I would have to reverse this and start with the boys. So I would do 14 to 10. Here, if I'm focusing on the boys, I don't need the girls amount. I would have to change this 14 to 24. Over here, it would change. I would need to change the 10 because that's the girls amount, and I would have to change that to a 14, and it would be 24 to 14. Now, any of these, I could make these for every statement. So I could say here, there's for every 24 hours, there are, and this would be specifically for today, there are 9 hours of daylight. Sorry, this is a little messy. Kind of ran off the board there. So I could go up here and say for every 11 wins, the Browns had 5 losses. Okay. For every 16 games, the Browns had 11 wins. And that would be specifically for this season. So I can also make for every statements. Okay. So that gives you a little rundown of ratios, what they are. Remember, they're comparisons of 2 amounts, how to write them with a colon, a fraction, a to, or a for every statement. And we can do them from part to part to whole, or whole to part. All right, so the activity that you are to do this week is you're going to be looking at pictures and writing ratios from the amounts of different objects that are in the pictures. Okay, you're going to have to look specifically and see what object they ask for first. That amount will go first. And you also have to look to see, are they talking about the object to the other object, or the object to the whole, or the whole to an object? So you have to be careful. and you have to look at these carefully and figure out for yourself which one that they're doing. Also, make a judgment on which way that you want to write the ratio. Any way that you write it, as long as you start with the correct number and you end with the correct number, would be fine with me. You could write it with a colon, you could write it as a fraction, or you could write it as a to statement. Okay? All right. Keep watching, keep thinking, always stay curious, and I'll see you next time.